Gone. Should, okay, I just had not thought. That should that I think I still have to press. Try hide one. I just in mine I'm gone, but let's see. Hide. We only want speaker.
That's what I thought. I don't know, did you? I don't know.
What if maybe I'll just
Okay.
if I leave, then that I guess that would work.
Close out. I don't know if you have to make the host or.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna assign to you the host, assign and leave.
Recording in progress.
So good evening,
Dear Thầy, dear noble community, thank you for your presence for this evening. We are the monastics from Blue Cliff Monastery in Pine Bush, New York. We are invited to be here tonight with you all in order to celebrate the new edition of one of Thay's famous books, Lotus in a Sea of Fire. And in order to begin this evening activity, Sister Nội Nghiêm, Sister Inner Strength, and I myself here to support her, Sister Empathy, we would like to welcome you and to invite you with some meditation songs. This is a practice that we usually do at the beginning of each Dhamma talk, or each formal sharing. So if you have the songs that we already pass it out while we practice walking meditation, you can take it out and share with your friends next to you. Thank you.
So, dear noble community, the first song, can you hear me well? Now can you hear me well? So the first song we will sing is the song named Breathing In, Breathing Out. Breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. I am blooming as a flower. I am fresh as the dew. I am solid as a mountain. I am firm as the earth. I am free. Breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. I am water reflecting what is real, what is true. And I feel there is space deep inside of me. I am free, I am free, I am free. One more time. Breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. I am blooming as a flower. I am fresh as the dew. I am solid as a mountain. I am firm as the earth. I am free. Breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. I am water reflecting what is real, what is true. And I feel there is space deep inside of me. I next song will be the song named I Am Free. Can you see this song? I am a cloud, I am the blue sky, I am a bird, spanning down its wings. I am a flower, I am the sunshine, I am the earth, reason and unseen. And I am free when my heart is open. Yes, I am free when my mind is clear. Oh dear siblings, oh dear siblings, let's walk together mindfully. And I am free when my heart is open. Yes, I am free when my mind is clear. Oh dear siblings, oh dear siblings, let's walk together joyfully. How about the song Happiness? Happiness is here and now. I have dropped my worry. Nowhere to go, nothing to do. No longer in a hurry. Happiness is here and now. I have dropped my worries. Somewhere to go, something to do, but I don't need to. One more time. Happiness is here and now. I have dropped my worries. Nowhere to go, nothing to do. No longer in a hurry. Happiness is here and now. I have dropped my worry. Somewhere to go, something to do, but I don't need to hurry. I don't know we still have time or not. One more song. One more song. How about the song, Here is the Pure Land? Here is the pure land, the pure land is here. I smile in mindfulness and draw in the present moment. The Buddha is seen in an autumn leaf, the Dharma in the floating cloud, the Sangha bodies everywhere. My true home is right here. Pray find joy every moment.
Enough singing? Flowers for all of us. Now I would like Dr. Su Young Park to have some introduction of this special event in this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And good evening. I welcome you to Union Theological Seminary. My name is Suyan Park. I am the Vice President of Academic Affairs and Dean here at Union. I bring warm greetings from President Serene Jones, who is unable to be here with us this evening. She is very disappointed to not be here to welcome you in person. We at Union are delighted that we're hosting this event with our partners, the Parallax Press, the Blue Cliff Monastery, and the Thich Nhat Hanh Foundation to celebrate the new edition of Thich Nhat Hanh's monumental book, Vietnam, Lotus in a Sea of Fire. Allow me to share a brief history of our Buddhist program here at Union and our connection to the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh. Thai earned the Joint Master of Arts in Religion from Union and Columbia University in 1963. He is also the recipient, 2017, of the Union Medal, which is Union's highest award, honoring individuals whose lives reflect the mission of the seminary in the world. In that same year, 2017, we have enrolled our first cohort of Buddhism and Interreligious Engagement, BIE program. By studying Buddhism within the interreligious engagement field at Union, students are invited to enter into some of the most exciting and challenging conversations of our time. They explore questions like, how do we understand social justice through a dharmic lens? How do we engage one another's faiths and traditions without causing harm? How do we orient spirituality in a time of climate crisis? How does one respond skillfully to a world in need of deep healing and transformation? At Union, BIE students are able to discern these questions and countless others together with a cohort of Buddhist students while engaging diverse student perspectives across faith traditions and worldviews. As of this year, 21 students have graduated with a BIE concentration, and currently it is the largest single group of MDiv students at Union. They form 21% of the Union student body, and their presence has shifted how we teach and how we learn. They challenged our long-held assumptions about community and formation. They accompany and have been accompanied by practitioners of different contemplative traditions, finding deep alignment as well as difference. Together, we learn what it means to practice interreligious engagement and social justice. Along with this exciting and new academic BIE program, and in conversation with the leadership of the Order of Interbeing, the Thich Nhat Hanh Program for Engaged Buddhism was launched in 2017, as outward-facing program to promote academic and public education aimed at cultivating diverse Buddhist perspectives and responses to pressing social issues. It seeks to generate innovative and informed discourse on topics such as violence, climate change, racism, poverty, and economic inequality, incarceration, gender and sexuality, religious pluralism, and the intersection of contemplative practice and social action. Since then, the Thich Nhat Hanh program for Engaged Buddhism offered public courses, lectures, Dharma talks, organized and convened Buddhist teachers and practitioners. For example, in February of 2018, the program organized a large meeting of Buddhist activists, which gave birth to the Buddhist Action Coalition. In October of 2018, the program hosted the first national meeting of Black Buddhist teachers in the US. The program also established ongoing relationship with Blue Cliff Monastery, whose monastics have offered multiple days of mindfulness to the Union community. And as recent as August 30th of this year, we had a visit from the Venerable Sister Chan Kong, and to the room full of students and devotees of Thai, Sister Chan Kong shared stories, wisdom, and songs that spoke to the power of mindfulness, the importance of humanitarian work, and how she braved immense challenges with a heart of compassion. It was so very inspiring to be in her presence. And personally, for me, it was an invitation to further commit myself to Buddhist practices of peace and compassion. Now, if I may take a moment of personal privilege here, Thai has been a spiritual guide that led me back home to my ancestry after a lifelong practice in the Christian tradition. Through his books, videos, Plum Village apps, and podcasts, I have been immersed in daily meditations and singing, practices that fed me like mother's milk and spoke to me in my mother's tongue. As a Korean-born woman whose parents lived through the colonization, dislocation, refugee camps, wars, and subsequent division of the peninsula, with my family still divided and separated across the 38th parallel for over 70 years, I feel the words written in his book, Vietnam, Lotus in the Sea of Fire, viscerally and in my bones. Today, in Christian calendar, is called the All Saints' Day. It is a day we remember the saints and ancestors who went before us. And according to Celtic spirituality, it is also a thin place, or thin time, a special place and time when the veil between this world and the other world, the veil between the world of the living and the world of the dead, becomes permeable. We reach out through the veil and ask our ancestors to visit us, connect with us, to be reintegrated in our lives as we commemorate them. And this event, on this day, commemorating Thai, by reading and meditating on his words, is a living continuation of Thai and his work embodied in each and every one of us and in this collective body. So welcome. Welcome to this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dean Pa. And thank you not only for welcoming us, but for being such an ongoing, unwavering supporter of Buddhism in this community. And I want to thank Parallax Press and their incredible team that has put this together and brought this book back to us again, and to the Order of Inner Being and their part. And thank you to the Blue Cliff Monastery monastics for caring for us tonight. And to the Union for hosting us, and to the Union BIE students for their work in caring for this, and to Peace Twesaji, the Assistant Director of the Buddhist Studies program here, who has put an enormous amount of work into bringing this together. Thank you very much. You continue to be the heartbeat of this program. So I am Kristen Gregory Snyder. I'm the Senior Director of Buddhist Studies here, and I want to talk a little bit about this book in this time, because a question might be, why are we reading a book on Vietnam and this many years later? And I believe that the book we're celebrating here is a complex teaching for us in this time. Though it is technically not this historical moment, it has a great deal to offer our age. We are in this age, we too often shrug off without thoughtful analysis in favor of fear-inducing shouts and snippets and short-sighted political fervor that has delivered us increasingly into intractable stances, rendering many of us unable to hear those who don't already agree with us. While there may be no literal civil war in our nation, the mind of such a war is to be found in many, many places. In the original foreword to this book, the Trappist monk Thomas Merton laments, one of the great tragedies of our time is that in our desperate incapacity to cope with the complexities of our world, we oversimplify every issue and reduce it to a neat ideological formula. Sadly, this tragedy has not seemed to have lessened. The compassionate care of life that so requires the kind of analytical and practical nuance found in these pages is still often reductionistic or set aside for the sake of greed and political expediency. To act compassionately in a confused and violent world, we must understand our shared suffering, as Thai has taught us. But to understand that suffering, we must clarify its causes. This is a book that deeply considers polarized violence, detailing historical contexts and contemporary realities to find a way through entrenched political dualism so a peaceful solution might put an end to the mass killing of life. As such, we desperately need the kind of example this book skillfully provides to better inform the polarization of our own age. The title of this book, Lotus in the Sea of Fire, reminds us of the Mahayana imagery of a lotus in muddy water. The image is often used to refer to the fact that liberation from suffering, nirvana, must occur within the everyday human reality of suffering, samsara. Tay recontextualizes this lotus in the fires of war, napalm, bombed and burned villages, and the self-immolation of Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh Foundation, a respected Buddhist elder whose self-immolation was a few blocks from the Palace of Saigon, Presidential Palace of Saigon. However, fire has a much, much deeper meaning for Buddhists. In the fire sermon, the Buddha teaches that the whole of human life and experience is burning with the fire of greed, hatred, and delusion. Lotus in the Sea of Fire not only points to the material reality of burning lands, but to ears trained in Buddhist scriptures, it exposes the spiritual causes of those fires. I believe if we are to understand Thay's teachings fully, we can never lose sight of the historical reality that his teachings of interbeing and mindfulness were forged in the fires of a warring homeland. Thay's opening this book with the story of Thich Nhat Hanh Duc's self-immolation provides great insight into the work of his life, at least for me. He recognized that the Western world was unable to hear the war, unable to see the war. If you remember the conversation on the airplane where he muses over this, it took something as egregious as a man burning for us to wake up in this country. Maybe it was Thai's time traveling between Vietnam and the United States in the early 60s that made it clear to him that if we are to stop war, we need to cultivate bodies that can see, hear, and feel harm and violence in our world. Since the war, Thai's work has been to teach us how to hear with the whole of our bodies and our being, to touch the world deeply so that human lives are loved and valued over warfare. Thai's life centered a great concern for this depth of feeling and response. If human bodies were not themselves peaceful, if they were not receptive, if they could not see, hear, and feel the suffering of the world, then peace would never be possible. We would simply continue our lives of privileged aloofness and dulled senses. Thai instead asked us to enjoy our breath deeply in every moment, feeling our entire bodies. When asked by one of his students how to respond to the ecological crisis, many of you know this, he replied, "What we most need to do is to hear within us the sound of the earth crying." There wasn't a list of things to do. He advocated calming and sensitizing our bodies so that we became peace and felt the suffering of all beings. He insisted that we have to walk in a way that we only print peace and serenity on the earth. Thai worked his entire life to create the deep conditions for peace by teaching the integration of serenity, compassion, and interbeing to his students to cultivate bodies throughout which are the infinite hands and eyes of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. Though he is known in his later years for his teachings of mindfulness and breath, he always understood the socially engaged aspect of compassionate transformation born of presence. In his essay, Spring Thunder, Thai writes, "If you see the suffering of the world but haven't changed your way of living yet, it means the awakening isn't strong enough. You haven't really woken up." During his years surviving colonial, civil, and American conflicts in Vietnam, he challenged the Orthodox Buddhist leadership to act, to renounce a customary remoteness and embrace this new Buddhist path, which for him grew out of the villages and the people who were finding their way through a homeland on fire. Thai celebrated one villager's expression of this engagement. The Buddha no longer sits in the temple all the time. The Buddha goes out to the people. Today, Thai's life challenges us to renounce our remoteness, to feel thoroughly, to discern causes and conditions, and to act appropriately to end violence and suffering. The efforts of the Vietnamese people to bring about peace in their country live through the mindful breaths Thai encouraged each of us to feel in every moment. For the human world to transform, we must deeply turn the soil of our bodies, hearts, and minds, so that peace is not a detached, quiet state, but a fearless, liberated activity. The title of his book is no less relevant today. Our world is on fire, literally with the fires of ecological crisis and war, and spiritually with the exploitative, dehumanizing, extractivist practices rooted in our human greed. If we are to honor Thai's life, we must come to our senses. We must wake up to our hearts. We must wake up to the cries of the earth's lived presence. We must change the way we live. The earth is now the one who has set herself on fire in hopes we will feel her cries and change. Thai's life and teachings have shown us a way to do this. He has given so much of himself. In January of 1963, while living a few blocks south of here, many of you came from there, Thich Nhat Hanh entered these words into his journal and would eventually be published in Fragrant Palm Leaves. Life waits patiently for true heroes. It is dangerous when those aspiring to be heroes cannot wait until they find themselves. When aspiring heroes have not found themselves, they are tempted to borrow the world's weapons, money, fame, and power, to fight their battles. These weapons cannot protect the inner life of the hero. To cope with fears and insecurities, the premature hero has to stay busy all the time. The destructive capacity of non-stop busyness rivals nuclear weapons and is as addictive as opium. We know this. It empties the life of the spirit. False heroes find it easier to make war than deal with the emptiness of their own souls. It seems to me that this moment right here, that easier to make war than deal with the emptiness of our own souls, that Thich was entering right there at that point and asking us to look at something else. In the end, Thich may have been asking us all to do the work of becoming true heroes. His heroism was that of a gentle, steadfast, receptive, and fearless engagement with the whole of the world. A practice that both embodied and ardently refused to lose sight of a humanity, presence, and peace that at base is common to us all. He asked us all to breathe, feel, listen, so that we can witness and heal the wars within us and across the world. This book is a critical piece of that understanding. It shows us his heart and what forged it so deeply so that it could be turned to the world in such a magnanimous and magnificent way. I am grateful for all the work that has been done to bring this book back into our consciousness. May it provide the encouragement for each of us to engage the world of suffering with the discerning wisdom and compassionate heart that Thich brought so fully into our world. Again, deep gratitude to Parallax, to the Order of Inner Being, to Thich, and to everything that you continue to bring to us. We are grateful for his teachings, and we will carry them forward in our practice and our activity. Thank you all very much.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all, and thank you so much to the Union team and Kosin and Dean Pak and the Blue Cliff Monastics for being here as well. So I'm Jacob. I'm an editor at Parallax Press. This is the book that we just brought out this year. And this is Matt, another editor at Parallax. And we're just going to read a selection from the book to you all.
So, good evening, everybody. So we chose this selection from a section called American Soldiers, How the Peasant Sees Them, because it highlights, well, first it highlights how the poorest among the Vietnamese people at that time, how they perceived the ideological battle between anti-communism and communism. It describes the war as it affects those people's daily lives, and it sheds some light on where the peasants' loyalties lie and why. So, Thich Nhat Hanh writes, "The peasants are not concerned about ideology. No one can frighten them with stories of the evils of communism. With their property already destroyed, they do not fear that the communists will take their property. And if one speaks to them of freedom and democracy, they say, 'Of what use is freedom and democracy if one is not alive to enjoy them. So it is clear that the first problem of the Vietnamese peasant is a problem of life itself, how to survive in the midst of all the forces that threaten them, how to cling to life itself. Americans see war through the eyes of newspaper correspondents in terms of guerrilla soldiers and their own boys fighting bravely against desperate foes. Vietnamese see the war somewhat differently. They see it as I saw it in a small village, oxen drawing a simple peasant cart along the road. In the cart was a young Vietnamese woman holding her month-old baby in her arms and with her mother beside her. The cart was piled high with their possessions, and out of the sky there descended a helicopter, its blades rattling and its motor roaring. The oxen were frightened and ran away, throwing the women and their possessions all over the road. If it had been a motion picture scene, it might have seemed funny, but to them it did not. American soldiers descended from the helicopter and made it plain that they wanted the young woman to go with them. Both women implored the soldiers for mercy, but there was no mercy. The young woman handed the baby to her mother and let herself be pushed into the helicopter and carried away. This is the face of war as the Vietnamese villager sees it and as all the simple victims of war have seen it. There is nothing good to be said of this kind of thing under any circumstances, but the damage is multiplied 1,000-fold when they are white soldiers in a land of non-white peoples. It is because precisely these things happen that the Americans can never conceivably win a military victory in Vietnam. It is because such things happen that the longer they stay, the more communists they create. And of course, it should be noted that the Viet Cong, who are the Americans' enemy, look exactly like other Vietnamese, who are their friends and whom they are allegedly protecting. The result is an undiscriminating attack with massive firepower on village after village, and sometimes even on units of their own allies in a futile attempt to destroy the Viet Cong.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, and I wanted to read from a later section called What Can Be Done. It's a short section, and I think, I'm not entirely sure when Thai would have written this. I mean, he may have written it in 1965 or 1966, but as many people know, he was outlawed in 1966, and he wasn't able to return to Vietnam for almost 40 years. So this is the passage. But how to stop the war? In Vietnam today, no one has the legal right to speak for peace. Indeed, those who do speak for peace put their lives in jeopardy. Speaking of these things, according to the Saigon government, is either communism or neutralism. And according to Saigon, neutralism is practically the same as communism. Anyone who speaks for peace is in danger of suppression, exile, or imprisonment. And even the former chief of state, Phan Quoc Su, when he speaks of peace, may not use the Vietnamese words Hoa Bin, whose meaning is unmistakable, but must use the words Tan Bin, which is a more equivocal expression. If the Vietnamese people were free to express their will at the ending of the war, then the war itself, along with the presence of American troops, would lose its raison d'etre. Officially, the Americans are there at the invitation of the Vietnamese to save them from communism. If the Vietnamese people were free to say what they really want, this official reason would be exposed as the falsity that it is in the eyes of all the world. That is why the American and the South Vietnamese governments both try constantly to silence the voices of those who speak out for an end to the massacre and for means of achieving peace. I'll read one more paragraph, because I think it also speaks to Thai's long tradition of publishing. The publishing house that he references here, La Boy, he founded in Vietnam. Early in 1965, La Boy Publishing House published a book of my poems entitled, "Let Us Raise Our Hands to Pray for the Appearance of the White Dove." The poems were greeted warmly by the people, and in less than a week, 4,000 copies were sold. They spoke of hatred of the war and of the desire to bring it to an end. But the book was not so popular with the official warring bodies. The Saigon government ordered it seized, fortunately after it had been sold out. Radio Peking, Radio Hanoi, and the Voice of the National Liberation Front denounced it. The Saigon government said that the author was obviously a communist. The other side declared, his soul and body have obviously been entirely bought by the Pentagon and the White House. However, the anti-war voice faithfully reflects the feelings of the peasants of Vietnam, and only a course of action that is consistent with their feelings provides any hope for getting out of the quicksand of this war. I think we'll end there, and again, thank you so much, and I think we'll turn it over to the Blue Cliff Monastics now.
Good evening. Can you hear me well? Okay. Good. My name is Brother Dharma Emptiness. In Vietnamese, is Brother Pháp Không. And I prepared something, but I'm going to speak from my heart. And I think it's wonderful to be able to participate in this event of the republication of the book Vietnam, Lotus and the Sea of Fire. My story is very much the story of South Vietnam. I was born in Saigon, which means Ho Chi Minh City. In Saigon, we always call Saigon. And from 1955 until 1975. So my story, at least my early life, is the story of South Vietnam. My father studied in France, and he specifically studied photography, and he brought back photography to Vietnam, and he has a photography studio in Saigon. So he came back to Vietnam after the 1954 Geneva Peace Conference, which divided the country in North and South along the 17th parallel. So my father decided to support the formation of the South Vietnamese government. So he came back to Vietnam, and I was born in Vietnam. So I grew up under the war of Vietnam, what we call Vietnam-American War. I think it started around 1963, I think, that's when it started. So to me, during the book, I reread the book, Lotus and the Sea of Fire. Thầy mentioned about 4 times that there is a contingent of Vietnamese people who are for the independence of Vietnam, but who are not necessarily for the American or for the Communist Party. And he mentioned 4 times, I remember. So my father is one of the person like that. He was involved in politics, but he decided not to get involved because he knows politics can be very ugly. And the war, of course, is very ugly. So he stayed on the business side, you know. So to me, when Thầy mentioned, which was read, they observed the peasants, the people in Vietnam, they got the bomb, they got the mortar falling on their head. So they don't care whether it's communist bomb or American bomb. They just want to stop falling on their head. And I personally was involved a few battles. I got shot. I was hiding under the truck when the incoming cannon shell were coming, the mortar shell were coming. In 1963, a revolution. In 1968, a Tet offensive. 1972, the offensive, and on 73, 74, 75. So I think I can testify that the war is ugly, and we, peace-loving, we have to do something to stop the war. So to me, it's very important to bear witness and to see the language what our teacher was trying to convey in that book. I read that he did the whole tour in 1966, and he went the rest in Europe, and in Paris, he decided to compile all his talk, his speech, into the book. And it's published by Here and One at that time in 1967. So luckily, I still have a copy. This is the original book published by Here War. The publication house is no longer exists. So luckily, Parallax Press is able to get the right to Thai's copyright and republish. So I'm glad that we can do it. And to me, this is now a collector edition. Because there are only a few thousand books were published. So we want to keep a library of the monks, you know. I have a library in Maple Forest Monastery in Vermont, and when we moved, we throw a lot of things, but luckily I kept that. So I still can testify. So to me, to understand the context of our teacher, what he was trying to convey, can you imagine now we have a war between Ukraine and Russia? Imagine somebody from Ukraine coming to Moscow and start to say, please stop the war. That is the context of what our teacher will come to America to speak about stopping the war. You see how hard it is? Because in the thick of action, of battle, of war, nobody wants to stop. I think Ukraine doesn't want to stop, and Russia, under some dictatorship, they don't want to stop. I'm sure the people in Russia, some of them want to stop, but they don't have a voice. Just like in South Vietnam, a lot of people don't have a voice. We try to speak, but nobody listens. And we don't have a speaker to help. And that's why our teacher were coming to U.S. to speak for the people of Vietnam, to create a third delegation at the Paris Agreement when they negotiated. But luckily, unluckily, he was not able to have a voice. The final peace agreement was signed between Le Duc Tho and Henry Kissinger, which is American and the North Vietnamese. The item is very complex in the sense that very few people fully understand the intricacy of the Vietnamese conflict. To give an example, I have a cousin. She's with the National Liberation Front. She's married to a 5-star general in the National Liberation Front. At that time, he was 3-star. After the war, he would promote to 5-star. And the South Vietnamese government were trying to arrest him and his wife. And so they come to my father, they ask to hire them. So my father, who is not involved in anything, he said, well, you are a relative, so I'm going to hire you because I don't want you to be arrested and imprisoned. So it's very complex in the sense it's almost every family in Vietnam, we have somebody on one side or the other. The former vice president of South Vietnam, Trần Văn Hương, who was with President Nguyễn Văn Thiệu, the last one, he was a close friend of my father. He was a teacher, and he was a Mandarin. So he has some respectability, and that's why he brings a certain stability to the South Vietnamese government. But of course, the power was held by Nguyễn Văn Thiệu and Nguyễn Cao Kỳ at that time. So to me, and Trần Văn Hương also has a son in the North Vietnamese army and a son in the South Vietnamese army. That's how complex it is. So that way, in the book, I say that as long as the American come and the Vietnamese see a white folks, they say that you are invading our country. So the only thing to resolve is for American to withdraw and stop bombing. And that's what eventually happened after the 1972 Paris Agreement, what we call the Vietnamization process of the war, when the Americans withdraw and let the South Vietnamese government. And then I think it didn't supply enough weapons, and so slowly the North Vietnamese army invade the whole country of South Vietnam. The irony is my cousin, who is in the Southern Liberation Front, her 2 sons are now U.S. citizens. They study in the U.S. and they naturalize U.S. citizen. They marry American people, and now they live a happy life in the U.S. So those are the people who are against the American invading South Vietnam, and now they are also American citizens. So to me, the complex of the intricacy of the Vietnam War is very difficult. Like, how do you distinguish a communist from a non-communist among Vietnamese? And sometimes we are neutral too. We don't want to take side. We just want to stop the war. So to me, the context is, like now, if somebody come to Moscow and say, well, let's stop the war, it's very hard for people to listen. And this is what our teacher was trying to convey during this book. Yeah. So thank you very much for your listening. Thank you. Sister Flower want to share a little bit too. Yeah, something.
Dear respected Thai dear friends, I am a little bit nervous. Maybe I share is my personal, when I live in Vietnam, after I read Thai book, and what I wrote in the book Lotus in the Sea Fire, and I was a lot of surprise because when I grew up in Vietnam during the 1960s, 70s, I was a teenager, and everything they wrote, I didn't know about it because I grew up in a family of non-religions. My father is Chinese, and he was a Chinese businessman, and he worked very hard to get the money to make our life more comfortable. So we can have many houses, the car, and food. So since 1963-4, the first television created in the world, we have it, and the first car in the world, we have it. And you know that my father worked very hard. But my family, because my father is Chinese and my mother is Vietnamese from the countryside, so they just worship the ancestor, like memory, father and mother passed away. So we don't have any Buddha in our house. And so for me, when we just knew about Buddhism when I grew up a little bit, and when since my father had been sick because of cancer. And since that day, my sister and my mother started to go to the temple to pray for him to overcome his sickness. And so I knew in my mind that Buddha, like God, is the create, have a power, and can give you a life or not, and blessing the people. So in my mind, Buddhism like a religion, like any other religions. And during that time, we didn't know about the war. Even though I, like Brother Phúc Thông, we live in center of Saigon. And since I grew up, I remember I just went to school, and sometimes I went to the movie with my elder sister and watch the love story, And sometimes we watch on the television the news about the war. So since that, we know that the war is happening in Vietnam. and we can see many people die. And my mother said that we need to pray for the people who pass away. But then, what we pray for our father doesn't work, you know. I remember my sister. When I was about 10 years old or 12, he wrote the mantra of the sutra, Suram Gama Sutra, Kinh Lăng Nghiêm. Suram Gama Sutra is the mantra of every temple in Vietnam. They chant in the early morning, and they memory very well. And this mantra very powerful. And my sister wrote sentences of mantra and asked each of us to memorize, to chant it, to pray for my father, to overcome his sickness. And we did this very hard. I remember I have three youngest brother and sister, and we all remember 20 sentences. And so 4 of us had to chant for her, for my elder sister every night before we went to sleep. But, you know, finally, later on, my father passed away. And so since my father passed away, I thought in my mind that, oh, I don't believe it. This mantra, it doesn't work. So why we had to believe in Buddha? And also, but my sister and my mother started to go to the temple soon after my father passed away. And then during that time, I think the younger people in Saigon, they was looted by the government with the music, the sad music and the love story theme. Because I saw many young people, when I went with my sister to the city, to the town, and I saw many young people in the cafeteria, in the, you know, it looked like it's no war in Saigon, you know, even though sometimes we hear the bomb echo from far from the countryside. And so I knew that the war happened around. But my sister, they didn't know Thai during that time. And we didn't know anything about what's happened around us. Only one time I saw the fight, the movement of many people behind some father from Christianity. They have a movement against the government during that time, and the police beat them. And you know, this the image is came to my mind since I was about 14 years old, you know, in 1972 or 73. So then 1975, and finally, you know, when the communists come and they take over the country. But before that, after that, I remember my sister started they went out like both people, and we stayed behind with my mom. And I went to the temple with my mother. And I remember one monk of the temple gave me a book. And that book is the book talking about the history of Vietnam Buddhism in Vietnam, Vietnam Phật giáo Sư Luận, History Vietnam 1. And I read that book, and that is Thai, but Thai not put his name, he put another name, Nguyễn Lang, you know, the man name. And I was so amazing. This book is so good, you know. And later on, he gave me another book, and he told me that keep secret, because after 1975, Thai Thai book were banned in Vietnam. The government not allow Thai book to establish, to publish to the people. So only the monk in the temple, they have book, but they keep in secret. And this this monk, he gave me, and I read many books of Thai, but I didn't know who Thai was, you know. But in my mind, I was inspired. But I never know that. In about 10 years later, I was Thai disciple. So when I came to abroad, and I met Thai in London, in Birmingham, and so I started to attend Thai retreats in Birmingham, and seeing that I understood the Buddhism more, and my Buddhism is open, and I can see that Buddha is not God. Buddha like a human being, a person who found the suffering and who found the end, how to end up the suffering. And this gives me the new idea about the Buddhist, about the Buddhism. And what Thai teaching, you know, I felt is very amazing. So when I read Thai Lotus in the Sea Fire, in my mind I have deep admire and respect of Thai, and I can't believe that I can have the research about the history of Vietnam, on the religion, on the political, on the group, with communist and anti-communism, on the you know, many religions in Vietnam, and what happened, every detail. And I really like a historian, a very special historian in Vietnam. So that's why I can write this book. Even though I remember one time I shared in one of Dhamma talk in Plum Village, long time ago, when I came to Switzerland, and I came back, and they shared with us in the one of the talk. They said that because in Switzerland, that is conference about peace or something, and one of the journalists from Switzerland asked me, "Are you the one who wrote this book, The Lotus in the Sea Fire?" And I said, "No, I am not." So, and you know, when I sat there and listened to Thai, I also surprised because Thai is the one who wrote this book and his name in there. But why he answered with the journalist in Switzerland? And so I wait for Thai and continue his talk. And I said, "Yes, I am not. No, I am not the one who wrote this book. But that is Thich Nhat Hanh of 40 years ago. Now Thich Nhat Hanh now is different." You understood what? Yeah? So I said, "Oh, understand." Because this is the way Thai talk about the non-self, the impermanent. And Thai didn't say that. Thai just say no, but it's not mean Thai is not the one who wrote this book, you know. So for me, the Lotus in the Sea Fire, it talk about the political in Vietnam, about the form of the war and the religion in Vietnam. Why the war in Vietnam? Why are the religion formed in Vietnam, like Christianity formed in Vietnam? So this is also the first time I knew about this. If I didn't read the book, because I'm one lazy about reading book and special history, I didn't like it much. But because Sister Brother Fokhong said, "You have to go to Union Seminary tonight," I said, "Really? I have to go?" So I said, "No, I don't want to go. I am lazy." But he said, "No, you have to go because you're elder sister. I have to go." Then I had to read the book. And you know, my younger sister said, "This book is very hard to swallow." You know why? Because it's very, very political and very dry. But the more I read the book, I can see that. But you know, when I read the first part of the book, it's very good. I like to know about the story of the king in Vietnam, like Thich Nhat Hanh Foundation. You know, is the history from the first part, and then it's naturally, I don't know why, I continue to read, and I can see that, oh, it's really good book. It's very good, and it's very good for your knowledge, you know, if you want to research about the history, you should, in Vietnam, you should read this book. And so when I read this book, I understood why the missionaries in Vietnam, when the first missionary of the Catholic, they have the wrong perception about Buddhism. And, you know, with the perspective of the modern people, I understood why, because I think they lack of scientific and technical means to study all the religion. But now if we want to research any other religion, you just go to internet and Google and everything will go up there. So we need to thank, you know, we need to thank our, I write here, we need to appreciate the senior scholar who researched the source of many religions and countries, like our teacher, one of the one who make the research. So if they don't do the research, it's very difficult for us to know what happened in the past, so that we don't need to do it now. So we need to appreciate, and we need to pay our respect to all our senior scholars who make the research for us to study. And I feel very gratitude to my teacher and all the scholars in the world about make the research for us to study and for the history of the world. But when we read this book, we will see that the world will run according to the machine of times. You know, religions also need to innovate themselves to suit the peoples in different countries and times. So from this book, we can see that the religion needs to innovate to suit the people in different countries. You know, we see why it's happened, why I did not understand Buddhism. I thought Buddha like God, because the teaching of the old tradition, it gave me the idea, perception about Buddhism. But since I learned from our teacher, I knew that Buddha is not God. You know, so this is the way of the religion need to learn on the religion. And when we read this book, I understood why, the reason why our friend here share about one monk have find himself, why the Buddhist monk, they fought for Vietnam, even though Buddhism is a non-violent belief. If you are non-violent belief, why you have to fight, you know? But we cannot judge and discuss such events in the past. We cannot judge. Why? Because we are not the one inside themselves. We are not the insider. We are not in that situation. We are not live in that environment. We are not live in the year they born, 1960, 50. So we need to understand why. We need to understand why they fight for the peace. because there are a lot of suffering, so they have to do that. So with an open and tolerant view, we can learn a lot from history. And we avoid stepping in the wrong footsteps of our ancestors. So like the war in Vietnam, the war from communist and anti-communist republics and socialists, Vietnam, America, or France, America, or China, America, or America, Ukraine. We need to learn from the history, but we didn't learn. We continue to step on the wrong step of our ancestors. So we need to learn the wrong footstep of our ancestors. So, but this evening when I walk meditation with our friends in the New York City, you know, I walk far behind, and in front of me a friend, behind on my right hand side one friend, and behind me one friend. And suddenly I thought myself, I did not walk alone. I walk with friends, with the energy of the Sangha. And then when we pass, and I have gratitude to my teacher. 40 years, 50 years ago, he lived in New York by himself alone, a young monk, 40-year-old. He lived in the small room in the apartment, and he by himself, he walked alone to go to the grocery to buy some vegetable or food. Because when we passed the food, suddenly I thought, oh, in the 40 years ago, Thầy Mai bought some orange and apple here. And there they can bought from bread, you know, or something. So suddenly I remember Thầy 40 years, 50 years ago, Thầy was here. He walked by himself alone. And now we walk with the community. Okay. So I think that from the war, Thầy give birth a person. From the war in Vietnam, give birth a person like Thầy. And I think the idea just come up to me is during the walking time, and I think Thầy like a lotus in the sea fire. Because Thầy have given birth to after the war in Vietnam, Thầy created the Youth Social Service School in Vietnam for the young generation, because he saw so many suffering around, and some people like my sister, they didn't know, but some young people in the countryside, they encounter so many suffering. So Thầy said, Thầy is the monk, and he cannot sit in the temple and do the meditation and chanting, while outside is war and people die of suffering. So from that, Thầy have created the Youth Social Service School, and from Youth Social Service School, Thầy bring the Buddhism to life, to ordinary life. This is called engaged Buddhism. Engaged Buddhism means you bring Buddhists to your house. It's not in the temple. You can bring to the toilet during you brush your teeth, you know. And now Thầy bring Buddhists engage Buddhism to apply Buddhism. So we can see that Thầy a lot of compassionate when he said apply Buddhism. Why? Because Thầy said apply Buddhism is not very difficult to understand. When you brush your teeth, you brush in mindfulness. When you eat a mouthful of food, spoon of food, you eat in mindfulness. When you walk in mindfulness. So this is applied Buddhism. From engaged Buddhism is go to applied Buddhism. So from the world, we can see the lotus flower bloom. And the flower bloom, the lotus flower bloom from the practice. From the practice. So for me, the flower, the lotus flower here is on the practice Thầy created, Thầy generated for us. Because He's the one, He's the savior who go first and who had to bear all the suffering. From His suffering, He know how to transform the suffering, and He want to transmit this suffering to us. So when I walk meditation with you, I have a lot of gratitude to our teacher. Thank you very much for sharing. I a little bit emotion.
We weren't quite sure what was next in our conversation, so I think now we're closing for the evening. Did I understand there was going to be singing or no? No, okay. So then I want to thank you all so much for coming and being with us here this evening. And please, books in the back. And thank you so much for coming from Blue Cliff and taking care of us this evening. And thank you for, I could honestly sit and listen to you all night. So thank you for sharing your stories and your hearts and connecting us so deeply to this work. And please have a good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here.